$600. It's $950. So we ran, we knocked on doors, we campaigned, we tried hard, and in a district of 25,000 people, we came 86 votes shy. That night, I got phone calls from individuals that I had never met. Hey, Larry, we were watching you from afar. You got to do it again. Hey, Larry, I was supporting your opponent, but if you run again, I'll support you. And we ran again. We just kept going. We didn't stop. 2 years later, we won by almost 700 votes. It was the largest margin of victory over any incumbent in the state. And you know what bill I started with? You know what the first call to action was? Minimum wage, economic dignity. If you give any business 40 hours of your life per week, you should be able to grab a gallon of milk, grab a loaf of bread without having to sign up for state benefits. Now I'm being on the inside, sometimes I call it the other side of the mirror. As a legislator, when we're running the bill, when we're working the bill with my great colleague, Senator Lockman, we saw some of the pitfalls, some of the obstacles that come up when you're trying to move forward a bill like that. And it was significant. We ended up having to have weekly meetings to discuss and strategize. And within 5 months of me being in office in the General Assembly, we passed Delaware's largest minimum wage increase in our state's history.
Another good one.
At the turn of the year, when I came into office on the day that I won, our minimum wage was $9.25. On January 1, it became $13.25. January 1 of next year, it'll be $15. That's because of you. That was a people-powered bill.
It was.
About a mile north of here, you know where the minimum wage is in PA? $7.25. 19 other states have the minimum wage of $7.25 in the year 24. That's the federal minimum wage. There are 2 states, Wyoming and Georgia, whose minimum wage is $5.25. Because it's so much lower, because it's lower than the national minimum wage, it defaults north. That's why President Trump talked about, why do we need a minimum wage anyway? Because those states, that minimum wage would be triggered. I'm so passionate and I'm so fired up because you are. I stand for you. I represent you in the General Assembly. On Martin Luther King Day, let's make sure we remember that he wasn't just fighting for racial justice, he was also fighting against poverty. He was fighting against militarism. I want to thank Becca for her leadership. It's been an honor to volunteer with you on the Racial and Social Justice Programming Advisory Committee. I love the outstanding work that YWCA does. I love the outstanding work that First Unitarian does. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having us. Have a great day. Happy Martin Luther King Day.
Great story. Thank you so much, Larry. It's now my pleasure to introduce a senator who's been a longtime supporter of YW, way before she was ever a senator. She's a full-time mom and is the Senate whip and is the first person of color to hold this leadership position in our Senate. Nope, sorry, was JJ? Oh, sorry, my bad. All right. Margaret Rose is amazing shoes to fill though, right? Please give a warm welcome to the Senator of the 3rd District, Senator Tizzy Lockman.
Thank you, Becca. And yes, we have to always make sure to give credit where it is due on a day like this. We want to make sure to recognize those who have blazed the trails so we can be here and do all this great work. And Senator Margaret Rose Henry did that in the Delaware State Senate. So good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to be here with you on this chilly, snowy-ish night. I know we cancel things a lot now at wind and rain. And I'm really pleased to see all of you here tonight on this very important and solemn day, Martin Luther King Day, to think about the way that we advocate. I'm sure a lot of folks in this room already are advocates. And so, to me, Martin Luther King Day is always a good day to kind of rejuvenate my commitment to advocacy. I am, of course, a legislator now, but at heart, I am an advocate and have a history of organizing, and this is the day that allows me to get back to my roots in that way. I've always attended the Martin Luther King Day March on the West Side since it was started, I want to say maybe 12 years ago now. That's just, to me, such a wonderful example of what it is to take to the streets and join together with your neighbors and with like-minded people to call for the things that this world needs. And that's what this day is about. That's what Martin Luther King's legacy is about. And that's what Becca asked me to talk a little bit more about tonight, coming together as a group and advocating. Also very happy to do it in this space. Just fun fact before I get into it, I was dedicated Unitarian as a baby and in Massachusetts, but my parents were members right here. And my dad did a lot of rabble rousing around racial inclusion and liberal faith. In this very room in the 70s, apparently there's a picture out there of him, I don't know, co-opting the mic or something. So love it here. Feel very at home, right? You can clap for that. It's on this day. So what I wanted to talk about is how organizing and group advocacy really led me to do this work now as a state senator, and why I know and feel in my bones how important it is. I got started in public policy work sort of by accident in a way. I mean, I came by it honestly. My father wrote about politics, and we were, my mom was a very strong member of League of Women Voters and things like that. But it wasn't something that I really thought about consciously. That's probably true for a lot of you as well. Probably just have a habit of engagement and a habit of being a good neighbor and voting and doing all of these good things. But when my daughter, who's now 20, was a little girl and going into kindergarten in a school in Wilmington, I was very keen to make sure that was a positive experience for her, as, we all feel as parents. And I was about 8 years removed from having graduated from Red Clay Public Schools as I was going into this experience for her. And I was very aware of how different our Wilmington Public Schools looked from the way that they looked when I graduated. I went to school when Delaware was probably one of the finest examples of socioeconomic integration. Was not so true in 2008 when I was enrolling my daughter in kindergarten. And so, I think, as I'm sure a lot of you can relate to, that spurred me to want to do more and get more involved and make sure that things were safe and that the education was strong and all of those kinds of things. And so that led me to lead the PTA at her elementary school at the time with the other very small but soon to be tight-knit group of parents who felt similarly. We had chosen to send our children to a school with challenges because we believed in sending our kids to school in a mixed environment, in a public school, and supporting a school in the city of Wilmington. We were all very aware of how things could be better. Some of the ground that had been lost, but some of the ideals that had never been achieved in the first place. And so what I learned through that experience was what a power a small group of very passionate people hold when they come together, they talk to one another, they ask questions, and eventually the right questions, and spur each other on and figure out who's making the decisions that are creating the environment in this way. And so we had a lot of meetings at our school, and eventually that turned into going to school board meetings. Those are not very well attended things for any of you who have been to any recently. And we soon learned that if 5 of us got up and stood at a podium and asked questions and made it clear that we were not satisfied and were worried and had some very specific ideas we wanted support with, we saw change very quickly. And so that was a very, very exciting time in my life, realizing that, I could get together with a few friends, harness our passion, ask some questions and get to the source and make some change. Now that was at the school board level, and that was, very motivating. And so that caused me, well, I'll speed it up, to go back to school, study some things around education policy, and begin working as an organizer at the Christina Cultural Arts Center. And there, because I believed so strongly that parents coming together could make all the difference in the quality of a school, that I could teach other parents to do this. And so then I was about to get educated, which is another great benefit of organizing as a group, is that you can take your own preconceived notions about what are the right changes to make and how to go about them, and compare notes with the experiences of others and realize maybe there's some things that you don't yet know about yourself or about how other people are living. And that will enrich your advocacy. That will give you stronger and better and more nuanced ways to fight for policy that will better help all of our neighbors, beyond maybe your little group of 5 friends. Well, all of a sudden you've got 15 and you've got a lot more ideas to grapple with. And then you're also probably going to be swimming in a bit of a bigger policy pond. And so what I was doing when I was organizing parents through what we called the Parent Advocacy Council for Education was we started engaging with state level policy. And at the same time, I was working on a group called the Wilmington Education Improvement Commission. And we were also working on state level policy. And what I discovered there is that, not only was I grappling with some of the challenges of bringing more inclusive ideas into my small group, which I found very invigorating, but that when you go to these larger venues for advocacy, is that you're also going to find a lot of different perspectives in those places. Lynn is nodding, and I know very well that Lynn knows. But so by design, we have all different types of folks serving as legislators, our esteemed colleagues, who don't all necessarily share the exact same goals that we do, and same ideas for policy change. And that's why we have to have, those frequent strategic meetings and conversations. But what I found is that, coming together, particularly with that broadened and deepened group of allies who do share those goals, is so important when it comes to fighting for justice and fighting for change, because our systems can be very entrenched at times. Oh, is that my 8-minute? Thank you. Can be very entrenched at times, and change can be painfully incremental. And so not only do we need the richness of diversity of ideas in our organizing groups to spur us along and make sure that we're advocating for change in nuanced and right ways, but we also need that support system, because it is hard to advocate, and it's hard to go face to face with those who have, maybe are not ready to be as empathetic to your experience. Maybe they're not ready to hear. I loved hearing Representative Lambert talk about hearing and listening and how important that is. And I feel exactly the same way. But we know that there are others who are, maybe a little bit more closed. And so, that work of trying to open ears and open hearts and open minds and open votes that we need to do things like change the minimum wage or fight for social justice, police accountability, all of those good things. We need our groups around us to help us not lose sight of the goals and not lose the energy that we need to fight these fights, which are often long ones. So those are really the really main thrust of my thoughts today as we reflect on what it means to be advocates. Again, I think you all know what we're fighting for in so many ways, but I just want you to take heart and know that there are listeners in Dover who are always happy to have you and always happy to honestly to stand next to you and advocate with you, even as we are there to receive your advocacy. And just not to give up, to persist, to check yourself and make sure that you are working in broad and inclusive groups as we fight for broad and inclusive reforms. And know that the system is designed to be a little incremental in some ways to protect us, as much as that can be frustrating when we know we are on the right side of history. So just to take heart, to stand together, don't isolate yourself in this work. We are making progress. We will continue to make progress, and we will only do that sticking together as a team and continue to fight for what's right and just. And so that's all I have for you. Are we doing questions after? No, we are not doing questions. Thank you very much. And I'm very excited. I guess I shouldn't.
I think we all would like to see the Eagles game. We're not taking questions.
Well, I'm excited to see Lynne Kielhorn, not so much the Eagles game. So,
Oh, yes.
one of my favorite advocates.
I think she's one of mine too, for sure. Thank you so much, Senator Lockman. Round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. Our next guest is a community advocate and one of the best I know. As a volunteer, I think she attends as many policy coalition meetings as I do. I asked her to share her journey with you today. Please welcome Lynne Kielhorn.
Thank you for inviting me to speak. It feels a little funny because I'm really just one of you. I mean, I work with so many of you on all of this, do a lot of this work together. Can you hear me okay? Sorry. But I will share a little bit of my story. Many of you already know this story, and I'll share some of what I've learned along the way. I once gave a talk on how I became an accidental entrepreneur. And so I'm going to take a page from that script and talk about how I accidentally became an advocate for social justice. I actually came to Wilmington as an engineer recruited by DuPont, but didn't take me long to learn that the corporate world really wasn't what I was cut out for. So I left, went back and got my MBA and focused on public policy, education policy. Education reform was a big thing for me once upon a time. But then a former colleague pulled me into the exciting world of entrepreneurial biotech. And I was fortunate enough to ride a really fun wave of launching, growing, and then selling a company. And that led me to, I'll fast forward to about 7 years ago, where I had to say, what's next? What do I want to do? And I started really looking around the world to figure out what I was going to take on. And that was about the time that many of you may remember this, that Wilmington made the cover of Newsweek magazine as Murder Town, USA. That hit me hard, and I immediately stopped my search. I knew I didn't have to look to the other side of the world to find something to sink my teeth into. When, kids in my backyard are shooting each other, there's something we're doing really, really wrong, and needed to get to the bottom of that. So as an engineer, I dive into data. So I took a deep dive into gun violence and looked around the country at evidence-based programs, what was working, what wasn't, what had been tried in Wilmington, what hadn't. And I'm not going to take you down that whole rabbit hole with me, but it was quite an educational experience getting into something like that. And along the way, I learned a whole lot about not only that specific issue, but all the underlying issues that were contributing to the problem. I learned so much about systemic injustices and really bad policy that previously I had been clueless about, particularly in criminal justice reform. For those of us not impacted by the system, it almost doesn't exist. I really knew very, very little about it. And how had I entered the second half century of my life, still without any sense of how truly crazy and counterproductive many of these policies are? And I'll come back to that point later. But along the way, I met lots of great people like you guys that are part of a giant social justice ecosystem, both staff of organizations as well as other volunteers. And I also got to know lots of elected officials and candidates for office. And most of what I've learned has been through trial and error with organizations like the Campaign to End Debtors Prison, which focuses on fines and fees reform, the Peace and Justice Work Group of Westminster Presbyterian Church, and a couple of years with the Delaware Poor People's Campaign. I know there's some of you out there as well. And so what have I learned? Mostly educating folks about the systemic injustices and really bad policy and how each of them can play a role in advancing reforms is really key. And so some examples might help. Understanding exactly how the status quo is failing so many people is not as obvious as you would think. And so for this, I'll pull the example from fines and fees. I had no idea that for a state with, at that time, less than 1 million people, we were routinely suspending 20,000 driver's licenses per year, not because of any driving infraction at all, but simply for failure to pay court debt. What kind of sense did that make? You know, either they could no longer drive to get to a job to make the money to pay the court debt, or they would drive anyway, get caught, and spiral further into the criminal justice system. Either way, it was a really dumb policy. Fortunately, that's one example of something that we have changed. But there's so many examples that if you don't know what's happening, you would never know existed. Potential solutions are often complex, interdependent, and involve lots of dollars. I could go down into examples of, do you know the difference between a criminal fine and a fee, and what would ability to pay mean? But a more striking example that is a hot issue right now is clean slate. If you remember, there was great legislation passed back in 2021 to address clean slate, and automated mandatory expungements are supposed to be implemented in August of this year. And we were expecting 290,000 people to be eligible for those expungements, which would be a really, really cool thing. However, we have since learned, this is where the devil in the details comes in, that fines and fees are going to be a barrier to those expungements for most of those people. The impact is not going to be what we thought it was going to be unless we can get our legislators to make additional changes and get it implemented before August. So I hope some of you will come out and support me in that little one. Bad policy can be bad for lots of different reasons. And oftentimes, different reasons will appeal to different people. And one of the things I don't like is that when one party comes up with a potential solution, the other party automatically thinks, well, that's got to be bad. I don't want that. Well, you know what? Oftentimes, there are really good reasons that are attractive to both conservatives and liberals to change a really bad policy. And so we need to know who our audience is and address them. And that reminds me of a really good point for advocates, is to always remember that national organizations are a great resource, particularly when it comes to understanding messaging for different audiences and things like that. They are a tremendous resource for almost any of the issues that we're engaging in. And all of this education goes for fellow community members and elected or aspiring officials. So with all due respect to my friends here, even candidates for elected office usually don't know much about policy except within a passion area or two. And so one of my suggestions, and Becca has heard this before, is I think as advocates, one of the things that we need to be doing is getting written down in real specifics the reforms that we want to see made, engaging with the candidates for elected office and educating them about these things. Encourage them to take our language and incorporate it into their own platforms on their websites. They'll be grateful for the education and information and have something to talk about. And we'll get someone committed to following through on those things that they are claiming as their own. I think it ends up being a win-win for advocates and the candidates. So I'm encouraging all of us to go do that. I also think although we need to learn from our mistakes, we don't want to go too far with assumptions. I know this example, Tizzy will resonate with. The Law Enforcement Accountability Task Force and its subcommittees from several years ago, to me, was not a very inspiring example of how to have success and move the ball forward. However, The Fines and Fees Reform Bill, HB 244, had written into the end of it the creation of essentially a task force to do further study on additional reforms. And having had one terrible experience, I could have just written it off and said, well, that's not going to do any good. Why bother? But we, got people onto that, nominated folks to get onto that, what was a study group. And actually, it had great success. So I can say over this past year, there were folks from the courts, from ODS, from the AG's office, from the governor's office, from the Department of Corrections, all coming around the table, working with advocates and putting in the time to make a really good set of recommendations that we could. Now, did the recommendations go as far as the advocates would have wanted them to? No. But they are a good set of recommendations that have the buy-in of all the key stakeholders. So we're really excited about driving those forward in this upcoming session. My last point is, this is a personal one. Not all the other advocates in the advocacy community agree with me on this. Don't vilify those that have a different view. My vision is very extreme of where I want to go. But I don't think the people that have a different vision on the other side are evil. And I don't think calling them names and speaking about them as if they're evil helps us get anywhere. I think our job is to try to listen to people, talk with people, engage in education to try to move them closer to our vision and where we want to go. So that's just my little personal thing. With all that being said, there's so many different ways to engage in advocacy. For those of us in this room, we need to help others find their entry point, and it might help to have them think about questions like these. Do you want to dive deep into a single issue or get lightly involved in multiple issues? How much time are you able to devote at a level that simply responds to calls to action, like signing a petition? Or can you actually, volunteering to help move an issue campaign forward? Would you prefer to invest in building relationships with your legislators or having the sometimes tough conversations with those around you who either don't know about or have a different perspective on a given issue? And those conversations you can have with neighbors, colleagues, or whatever can be really, really instrumental in moving things forward in the community. Are you comfortable speaking in public or putting your name out there? Or are you more of a behind the scenes kind of person? Which actually is what I like. Do you have a particular skill you want to leverage, or can you pitch in wherever needed? All of these are things that you can think about in terms of the way that you can get engaged or encourage a friend or colleague to get engaged in advocacy. But no matter what the topic or level of interest is, I guarantee there is an easy way to plug in. There's so many organizations and coalitions that already exist. Lots of email lists to join to stay informed, and plenty of support available for someone who wants to start something brand new. So please reach out to any of us who you've seen up here this evening, or for more information about how you or a friend can get plugged in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynn. That was amazing. She said, I don't know why you have me up here. She's been doing this a long time. That's why I have her up here. We're going to go ahead and go to the slides. No, wait. Yeah, you can go ahead to the first slide, I think. Sorry, guys. A lot of notes. So again, big thank you to all of our speakers and the time that they spent with us. And hopefully you learned some nuggets of wisdom from them. I know I did, even though I already know them. So, yeah. Oh, nope, backwards. I'm like, come on. Nope, backwards won't. Yeah, just the MLK quote. I don't know where that went. But so early in the evening, we were going to be playing a speech, but that kind of got missed anyway, but everyone was in there talking. But a speech that Martin Luther King did on the day after receiving the Nobel Peace Prize, I just want to share a brief part of it, especially today, because today's the day that we celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. and all that he achieved in his shortened life. and it speaks to the reason that we're here. So then came that glowing day a few months ago when strong civil rights bills became the law of our land. This bill, which was first recommended and promoted by President Kennedy, was passed because of the overwhelming support and perseverance of millions of Americans, Negro and white. It came as a bright interlude in the long and sometimes turbulent struggle for civil rights, the beginning of a second Emancipation Proclamation, providing a comprehensive legal basis for equality of opportunity. Since the passage of this bill, we've seen some encouraging and surprising signs of compliance. I'm happy to report that by and large, communities all over the southern part of the United States are obeying the civil rights laws and showing remarkable good sense. Again, quote by Martin Luther King. Obviously, I'm going to point to the sentence that I slowed down on really bad was overwhelming support and perseverance of millions of Americans, both Negro and white, which is all of us. So I think we're all well aware of the time, perseverance, and coordination required to mobilize a considerable number of individuals, as demonstrated during the civil rights movement. As I mentioned earlier, it was during this period that both the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act were enacted into law. This serves as a powerful example of what can be achieved when we join forces to address and target genuine systemic change together. Over the last couple years, YW has gradually entered the realm of advocacy, recognizing the potential for greater impact. I represent YW and actively participate in 8 coalitions, most of them Lynne are in, dedicated to addressing advocacy issues. These coalitions focus on critical areas such as housing, police reform, and education. Within our diverse coalitions, some members seek to advocate for specific policies, while others seek funding from the governor to support our causes. These coalitions serve as invaluable platforms for knowledge sharing, fostering discussions about new bills, tracking the status of existing ones, and strategizing on how to advocate effectively to sway legislators towards our shared positions. It's noteworthy that our advocacy efforts aren't confined to promoting policies. At times, we take a stand against certain legislation, such as those introducing heightened penalties and fines that disproportionately impact people of color. The collaborative nature of our coalitions enables us to navigate these complexities and work towards positive change. Ironically, I'm going to bring up a bill that Lynne mentioned because it was a long road. Last year, a police reform bill was introduced in committee. This bill had been worked on for several years by advocates. I'd been in the room, I'd been on the task force. So a third version of the bill was introduced. Unfortunately, the bill had underwent significant revisions, diluting its impact and deviating from the community's original call for reform. Adding to that challenge, the bill was filed on a Thursday and swiftly assigned to the committee the following Tuesday, catching our advocacy groups off guard with no prior warning. The rapid turnaround time is often a tactic employed to limit the ability of those against the bill to organize and provide input. Despite this, a heartening development unfolded over the weekend as 7 organizations, including our own, the League of Women Voters and the NAACP, rallied together. We collectively presented public comments at the hearing, showcasing a unified front for reform. However, despite these efforts, the bill proceeded out of committee and became law. This experience prompts reflection on the potential impact of our planned initiatives for this year. I can't help but wonder if a coordinated effort with a means to mobilize a larger audience, and that means you, to join our message to legislators could have been influential in shaping the outcome. I would bet it would. Organizing is leadership that enables people to turn resources they have into power. They need to make the change that they want. Organizing focuses on power. Who has it, who doesn't, and how to build enough of it to shift the power relationship and bring about change. The Reverend Martin Luther King described power as the ability to achieve purpose and the strength required to bring about social, political, and economic change. The power lies with us, but only if we are a loud, collective voice. Now, how do we do that? That's what we're going to talk about next. Would somebody mind passing out the folders that I yelled at everyone to pass out earlier? You don't need to look at these, but there's some things I might refer to in them. And so next, we're going to watch a short video that John's going to pull up. And I bet this is something most of you have already seen, but I want you to listen to it. And at the end of it, I'm going to quiz you. No, I'm just kidding. But take a listen and see if you understand what they're talking about. I also want to apologize if we're speaking in jargon this evening. If you have any questions about some of the things that we might talk about, I think Lynn used some, ODS is Office of Defense Services. These are all things I have learned. So when you guys working on the video?
Just a minute.
Okay, just a minute. Just a minute.
Where is it? There's not a video that's getting ready to play.
There's not?
No.
It's in the next slide. You can't hit play. Just click play on it.
The slide up there?
Yeah, there's no play.
Correct.
Oh, no. I don't know how that's possible. All right, can you Google that?
Yes.
You know what I'm trying to do, right?
Yeah. Can you tell me what the video is that we're Googling?
Linda, how a bill becomes a law.
Just a minute.
So they're going to Google it. How's everybody doing? Who got to eat dinner? Was it good? Yeah, it was all right. All right. Yeah, I cooked it myself. I appreciate the feedback. No, actually, some of it I did make myself because we needed some vegan pasta and I did the meatballs. Not really, but put them in sauce and bought them. So
An AARP Medicare supplement insurance
Gotta
plan
hear a
from
commercial
United
first.
Healthcare is the right plan for your life.
Whew, you sure gotta climb a lot of steps to get to this Capitol building here in Washington. Well, I wonder who that sad little scrap of
Oops.
paper is.
I'm just a bill.
Turn it
Yes,
up.
I'm only a bill. And I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well, it's a long, long journey to the capital city. It's a long, long wait while I'm sitting in committee. But I know I'll be a law someday. At least I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
Gee, Bill, you certainly have a lot of patience and courage.
Well, I got this far. When I started, I wasn't even a bill. I was just an idea. Some folks back home decided they wanted a law passed, so they called their local congressman, and he said, "You're right, there ought to be a law." Then he sat down and wrote me out and introduced me to Congress, and I became a bill. And I'll remain a bill until they decide to make me a law. I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And I got as far as Capitol Hill. Well, now I'm stuck in committee and I'll sit here and wait while a few key congressmen discuss and debate whether they should let me be. Hope and pray that they will. But today I am still just a bill.
Listen to those congressmen arguing. Is all that discussion and debate about you?
Yeah, I'm one of the lucky ones. Most bills never even get this far. I hope they decide to report on me favorably. Otherwise, I may die.
Die?
Yeah, die in committee. Oh, but it looks like I'm going to live. Now I go to the House of Representatives and they vote on me.
If they vote yes, what happens?
Then I go to the Senate and the whole thing starts all over again.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And if they vote for me on Capitol Hill, well, then I'm off to the White House where I'll wait in a line with a lot of other bills for the president to sign. And if he signs me, then I'll be along. I hope and pray that he will. But today I am still just a bill.
You mean even if the whole Congress says you should be a law, the president can still say no?
Yes, that's called a veto. If the president vetoes me, I have to go back to Congress and they vote on me again. And by that time, you're so
By
old.
that time, it's very unlikely that you'll become a law. It's not easy to become a law, is it?
No, but how I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill. He signed your bill. Now you're a law. Oh, yeah.
I always have to have something a little,
Hyundai Tucson versus Toyota RAV4.
always have to have something a little fun. How many of you remember that? Awesome. So could any one of you tell me what that just said and how a bill moves through the legislature? Like, what? Oh, yeah, it's behind me, but we didn't get there yet. Okay, so now I'm going to go over the hard part. I'm not going to put every detail into this because it is a lot to comprehend. So I appreciate you guys taking in as much as you can. So how a bill moves. Can anybody tell me how committees are formed? And you can't over here. Can anybody tell me how committees are formed? They mentioned committees. A bill has to go through a committee. Anybody know? It's okay if you don't. I didn't know either. So when a legislator is elected, it's a new session, the leadership of that particular, whether it be the House or the Senate, basically takes requests from the legislators, what committee would you like to be on? So they all turn their committees over, the leadership looks at them, and they make decisions based on whatever they want. Sometimes it's because someone is really good in education, so they put them in education committee, and sometimes other things happen and people go in no committees, but that happens. So first thing we do, well, bill does start with an idea, but the first thing that happens to a bill is it's either filed, some people call it introducing, and that's just submitting the bill. This is out there. Bills always have at least one sponsor in each chamber, the Senate and the House. Otherwise, they're not going to really move. Before a bill goes to a committee, leadership assigns that. So they get to say what bill would go to what committee. So if, for example, we had a bill that was going to increase the salaries of teachers, most likely that bill would go to the education committee, and most times. Now, there are some exceptions that leadership can make. So there's an additional step that's not in here, and that happens between the introduction of the bill by a legislator and its place in the committee. So the leadership of each chamber, as I said earlier, gets to assign the bills to committee. Normally, the bill about teachers' pay would be introduced and then assigned to the education committee. However, there are exceptions to this because leadership can use their power to stall a bill or push it through a committee, which is simply not assigning it to a committee, or assign it directly to their committee, which is the administration committee, which is made up of leadership who just decided where to put it. They might do this for a couple of reasons. One being they don't want the bill to go anywhere. In essence, it will die. See him die up there, the little guy? He died. So in essence, it will die. And sometimes we joke around that it goes in someone's drawer, et cetera. Although I will say that someone really did that with a lot of bills several years ago. And someone ran against them and took them out. And all those bills that were in the drawer, like they passed. It was crazy. But, but the people did that. People wanted those bills done. So they got the person out. They don't want to go to it. Okay, so, or they know the bill's not going to get past the committee, which means maybe it's a really good bill, but there's 4 people in committee that are super conservative. And the bill's just not going to get out of that committee and hit the floor. The leadership can actually assign that bill to their committee, which is the admin committee, and they can slide it right out onto the floor, especially if they have the votes that can be done. Sometimes there's just like one person holding things up in the committee, unfortunately. So the bill goes to the committee. The bill pretty much follows this graphic. I think I'm on this one, right? So the bill goes to, well, first it's introduced, and a bill can be introduced in either House or the Senate. Okay, so we're just going to say, for example, this one is introduced into the House. So it's introduced, it's referred to the House committee, which we kind of just talked about. And then it has a committee hearing. Committee hearing is kind of however many, from 5 to I think 13 sometimes, legislators in a room. But this is a really important part where you can make a difference. And you have the ability to do public comment. during these committee hearings. It is really the only time that you get to speak publicly on this specific legislation anywhere in Dover. So this is an opportunity to simply call up. What's great now is COVID did allow us to do things virtually. So now, unfortunately for them, they have a lot more people making public comment, but that's good for you guys, right? So the bill goes in there. Enough people voted out. Great. Then it goes to the second reading. Second reading is basically if anybody, either in the committee, perhaps the sponsor, has offered to add amendments or change the bill, or if someone comes up to the sponsor before it gets out onto the floor and says, hey, I'd like to do this amendment, and then they redo the bill, and then it's presented. And it goes to the floor for a vote. So I think we can all know what happens when the vote happens, right? So then the bill moves back over and does it all over again. So it goes to the Senate. The bill is introduced. It's referred to a Senate committee. Again, the leadership gets to decide what committee it goes to. So this is going through one group of people, now another group of people. A committee hearing, same thing we talked about earlier, second reading, third reading. Here's the thing, if a bill is amended, it has to go back through. So if the bill went all the way through the House and all the way to the Senate and it gets amended at the end, it has to go all the way back to the House and all the way through again. Very complicated. So and then they did talk about the bill then goes to the governor and it can be vetoed or signed into law or actually ignored, which is what happened with legalizing marijuana in the state of Delaware. The governor vetoed it the first time. It went back to the legislator. Not enough of them would step out of their safe space to legalize it. They did it again the next year, and the governor so after a certain amount of days, do you know how many? I want to say 10 or 30 or something. It's some specific amount of days. If the governor doesn't do anything with the bill, it will automatically become law. Did you guys know that? Oh, God, you guys, why are you even here? Oh, my goodness. So, does anybody have any questions about this thing right here? No? No questions. Everybody's got it? All right. All right, you guys are awesome. Yes. That's a great question that you can actually find on the General Assembly website, or you can email me and I'll tell you. But generally speaking, yes, on the General Assembly website, if you click on the bill, you go down to the bottom, it'll tell you the journey it's had or how early in the process it is. One thing I forgot to say before we move off of this is if a bill has money attached to it, which is called a fiscal note. Oh, were you going to say I forgot about this? I'm not. So let's say that bill to raise teachers' wages went through. Awesome. We're going to pay the teachers more money. However, now it has to go, depending on whether it's in the House or the Senate, to the Finance or Appropriations Committee. Okay, in the House it's called Appropriations, and the Senate it's called Finance. And those individuals say, all right, we've got the money in the budget. Or they say, there's no money for that. Try again next year. And that's when people go to the governor and say, can you put this money in the budget for next year? But so that can sometimes stall a bill. As if it needs money, a fiscal note is always an extra step. So that has an extra committee to go through. All right, next slide. Sure, that's okay. Joint Finance Committee is totally different. The Joint Finance Committee deals with things like grant and aid, which is money that they give to nonprofits such as ourselves. That's a Joint Finance Committee. That's not specifically. Go ahead, Susie.
Please repeat the questions so that online can hear them.
Well, I'll repeat you. That's right. Okay, so the answer was, the question was the Joint Finance Committee. What is that, the purpose of the Joint Finance Committee? And that committee actually listens to, as Senator Lockman said, listens to the Housing Authority, it listens to DSCYF, Children's Group, all of them, and they have a requested budget as well from the governor. So that's what the Joint Finance Committee, and they listen to the grant and aid. Yes, Lynn? We actually did do that last year for the first time. We went and talked to the Joint Finance Committee about housing. Because for those that don't know, we have a Home Life Center, which is a center for the unhoused families, which we're one of the few in the state that actually takes families, including teenage boys, so they can stay together. Any other questions? Yes. No. The red microphone, Lynn says, or Linda says.
Oh, there we are. The governor does his budget.
Mm-hmm.
That's so if there's a bill that passes a raise in teacher salary, that's in the governor's budget?
No.
So it's not in the budget, but it goes to the House or the Senate's committee on finances, whatever they're called, and not the joint finance. Does the joint finance have the governor's budget?
So what happens is the governor, and Tizzy absolutely can correct me if I'm wrong, the governor designs their budget. Everybody gets to see the governor's budget. And go ahead, Tiz, you go.
Yeah, so the governor's office puts their budget together sort of through the fall, which to your point, there's also an opportunity to go and speak at those public hearings as well. We can get more details on that later. For the development of the governor's recommended budget, we always like to make sure to add recommended in there as legislators because we want to make sure that it's a guideline. It is not the final budget. And so the recommended budget is what is presented to us. It'll be presented actually a week from this Thursday. So this Thursday is the state of the state.
Yep.
Next Thursday will be the presentation of the governor's recommended budget. And then that really becomes a draft from which the Joint Finance Committee then works. They spend all of February essentially reviewing that budget, and each agency will come forward and present their portion of it, talk about what they asked for, what ended up in the recommended budget, what didn't. And just as a point of clarification, you mentioned like a specific bill. Sometimes there are specific bills that haven't been passed yet that are represented in the governor's recommended budget. We do a lot of advocacy as legislators alongside advocacy groups to try to get things in the governor's recommended budget. I have a piece of legislation I've been working on for years, permit to purchase, which is, I believe, going to be in the governor's recommended budget this year. It was 2 sessions ago, but we didn't pass the bill. So all different things can happen in that way. So you may see a piece of legislation represented in the governor's recommended budget or not, but all of the legislation is going to be on the table for legislators to vote on whether or not it's in there. So the things that aren't in there, then the individual finance committees have a role in seeing whether or not those are going to actually make it to the floor. And then the Joint Finance Committee is going to ultimately vote on a budget that may or may not include. However, our Controller General and Office of Management and Budget have figured out how to fit that in. Is that helpful? It's a complicated process. Oh, sorry.
No, she brought in a third thing.
I brought in the other entities.
It
Oh, no,
specifically is.
It specifically is. And then ultimately they have to vote on the final budget, which is going to, we have
Include
a period
all
of
of it.
time in May called markup. And that is when any additional monies are going to be allocated to cover legislation that has been passed. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Paula. And Tizzy's right that legislators sometimes, especially if it has a huge fiscal note, for example, we passed family medical leave in the state of Delaware a year ago, and it's being worked on, but that was a huge fiscal note. So Senator McBride had to go to the governor and say, look, people want this, it's really important. And the governor said, all right, we're going to slash this, we're going to slash this, and here's family medical leave. I'm only hurt because they left out domestic and sexual violence off of there, but it's really important. It's going to help a lot of people, and sometimes yep. You got to start it to build it up. Yes, Tizzy's right. So advocacy, the act or process of supporting a cause or proposal. Next slide. Yep, great. So this is an example of a bill that went through 2 full sessions. The first time it went around, it did not pass. It passed the Senate, but it didn't pass the House. But on June 14th, 2023, right to representation for renters, which is simply when an individual gets evicted, often the landlord has representation when they go to court. Usually the evicted tenant never does because it's a cost thing. So we passed right to representation where they would get free, it's not necessarily a lawyer, but free services to guide them through the court process. But again, this bill didn't happen the first time around. We had to regroup over the summer, talk to more stakeholders, make some adjustments. And the second year it went through the Senate and went through the House, and it's now become law. But sometimes we don't get what we want the first time. So I'm only telling you this because sometimes you might try really hard and get disappointed, but if you just keep at it, it'll happen again, especially if you have an amazing legislator to champion that. Okay, real quick, now you guys can open your folders, which I think a lot of you already did. But what I want to share with you next slide, is our policy agenda. Isn't it pretty? It's in there for you guys to look at. So I will go over it, but I just wanted you to have your own version so you know. We at YWCA have 5 advocacy pillars: racial justice, housing security, economic empowerment, health and safety, and nonprofit. But really anything that falls under eliminating racism or empowering women is our jam. Like, that's where we live. So sometimes things might not be specifically spelled out in our policies, but if something comes up that is something we care about, then we'll get on board. So these are not set in stone. We might add some other things to it. So next slide. Okay, racial justice. Our policy pillar: advance equity, safety, and racial justice for people of color with a focus on the criminal justice system, accessible voting and elections, and environmental justice, education, and other systems with structural racial disparities. So this is a really big one. This is probably the biggest one. I shouldn't say that. There's plenty. All of them overlap. But so our priorities include education, and that's equitable funding. And there's actually a process going on right now where they're talking about if they're going to change the funding for our school system. Yeah, and a report was just recently released. So we support where the funds are most needed, not necessarily where the tax dollars are. And also support the training of a more diverse workforce in the field. Law enforcement reform. Increasing police transparency and accountability, such as implementing a data collection system for all interactions, providing additional support, such as social workers, along with law enforcement, and additional training, including school resource officers. Additionally, banning no-knock and reverse warrants. Next one. So housing security for women and families. Provide services to keep women and children in safe and affordable housing. Serve those who are going through the experience of being unhoused by providing safe and affordable housing for families. Priorities include tenant rights, police policies protecting tenants from unfair treatment by their landlord, establishing a rent escrow program, rent stabilization, and a homeless bill of rights. Funding for affordable housing, policies and budgets that create more safe and affordable housing, such as a consistent stream of funding for building affordable housing and increasing availability of those locations statewide. Establishing a right to counsel for indigent parents in custody cases. And so that's a bill that's up there now. And basically, if you are going through a child custody case and you don't have the funding, if this bill passes, you would get funding from CLASSY, which is the legal and what is it? Legal aid. Yeah, community legal aid. Next one. Yep, health and safety. To support survivors and work to prevent domestic violence, sexual assault, and other forms of gender-based violence as demand for services continues to rise. Work towards closing the gap in health disparities between people of color and white people. For those that don't know, YW runs SARC, which is a Sexual Assault Response Center. And unfortunately, we serve thousands every year. I think the number's over 15,000 since we've had it for 6 years. Is that right? Yeah, 6 years. Yeah. Yeah. Which tells us something because those are just the people that report it and talk about it. So priorities include victim rights and policies that protect and educate women on their rights as victims, policies that reduce the power that a perpetrator of domestic sexual violence has over a victim, including stalking. Equitable healthcare, policies that make healthcare equitable by increasing access and affordability to traditionally underserved communities, which includes any expansion of Medicaid services. Does anybody in here know what a doula is? Hi, you guys are amazing. So recently we had a bill up, and I think this is just amazing that we've moved this in the state of Delaware. Statistics have shown that doulas in underserved communities increase the chances of both the mother and the child making it. And so that bill was introduced to actually fund doulas through Medicaid. The bill has passed, and that was a fiscal note. A whole different thing, but that was really a great bill. So things like that we definitely support, and we advocated for that. Support establishing and funding a family justice center, which would provide one place for victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and child abuse to receive the life-saving services currently available in their community from both nonprofit and governmental agencies in each county. So we'd have one of these in each county. This has a task force that's been working on it for a while now, and another colleague of mine participates in that particular task force. So reproductive justice means the human right to control our sexuality, our gender, our work, and our reproduction. That right can only be achieved when all women and girls have the complete economic, social, and political power and resources to make healthy decisions about our bodies, our families, and our communities in all areas of our lives. Environmental justice. Justice that promotes fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, concerning developing, implementing, and enforcing environmental justice laws, regulations, and policies. Underserved communities are disproportionately affected by climate change. I'm sure that's no surprise to anyone in here. Next slide. Oh, you're already there. Okay, great. Economic empowerment and opportunities to ensure a fair and inclusive workplaces that expand opportunities for women, particularly women of color, LGBTQ+ people, and historically marginalized communities. This includes addressing childcare needs and providing services that support women's success in entrepreneurship and workforce development. Our priorities are pay equity. Representative Lambert talked about the minimum wage going up. However, now it is actually the cost of $25 an hour to live and pay for a place in the state of Delaware. So $15 is great next year, but Senator 25 anytime soon. And pay equity gap. And one of the big things, another bill up about that is actually servers. I don't know, everybody in here probably tips, but servers only make still $2.32 an hour. I was a server 25 years ago, and that's how much I made per hour. Childcare, support policies that increase access to childcare by increasing funding and availability by increasing the poverty level when applying for purchase of care reimbursement. And that's government help with daycare or childcare. And then minority women-owned businesses, increased support for women and people of color-owned businesses. We're almost done this part. Nonprofit sector. The nonprofit sector is the backbone of our community and continues to provide programs and human services for families in Delaware. We support efforts to strengthen these organizations. Our priorities include to restore and expand the above-the-line or universal charitable deduction and other tax policies incentivizing giving. It's really important because as someone who works for a nonprofit, we can tell you the moment that this law changed, so did our income and our bottom line. So it's really important that we work backwards and make sure that people get the benefit to donate to organizations like ours. Advocate for increased grants and aid to cover the rising costs across the nonprofit sector. Support policies that decrease costs for nonprofit organizations, such as community or state-supported healthcare model. So those are our policy issues. I want to tell you a little bit about how I did those the last couple of years. One of the things I did was meet with several legislators. And I asked them what they're working on. What can we help you with? And this year I met with more than ever. And when I promised them help, what I said was, we're going to ignite some people to really support you if you're passing good legislation. And what that means is sometimes Senator Lockman can share this. She might be totally in favor of a bill. It might be her bill. She might love it. But there's someone on her team that really is just not buying the bill. However, if you activate, let's say, 10 constituents to give that legislator a call about the bill, it can sometimes change their mind. If you've ever been at Legislative Hall when people decided to call in massive amounts, you can ask Senator Lockman what happens down there. It gets a little crazy. So next slide. So this is another opportunity that I'm super excited about. YW is going to take the lead on organizing a 2024 Get Out the Vote Coalition. We're going to register voters. We're going to educate voters. We're going to host candidate forums. And we're going to remind people to vote, which is the most important thing. And you can be a part of this. I'll tell you in a minute how you can do that. But there are other organizations, Metropolitan Wilmington Urban League, ACLU. There's other organizations that are joining us in this effort, Children and Families First, because they actually run Head Start, which is a good place to catch parents if they're dropping their kids off to register them to vote or remind them about things. Next one. All right. Now here's what I'm going to ask you guys, seriously. In your folder, as well as our policy things, there's this handout. Looks like this. It's got a little barcode on it. All right. The barcode takes you to a online space to actually fill this out. Or you can fill it out in pen and hand it in. But the barcode is probably the easiest. You can do it right now on your phone. Make me and my colleague Peggy happy when we get back and there's like, I don't know, 60 people registered. So the idea behind this is we want to contact you when we need you. We are not going to contact you for every bill that we support. You would go insane. When we would like to contact you is when your input is so necessary and can really make the difference. That's not all the time, but when we need it, we need it. And people move people move when they hear more than one voice, put it that way. And so if you guys could sign up for this, texting alerts and emails, and all we'll simply say is these are the things we're going to ask you to do. Contact your legislator. It's not that hard. They're regular people. Send an email, phone call. That's easy enough. Do possibly public comment, okay? And the great thing about public comment is you only have like anywhere from 1 to 3 minutes, depending on the committee. So it's not a long thing, but the more people are doing it, the better that is for all of us if we're trying to get something through. So I ask again for you guys to go ahead and sign up for this. On here, it's separated, so you can select everything YW Delaware supports, which would be my prerogative. But there's also, if you just want to know about things that come under racial justice, check that box. Just things about housing security for women and families, check that box, and we'll only contact you when things like that need your support. You can scan it at home. I think you can scan right on there. You're at home. You can just take a picture real quick, scan it. I will be sending out these documents to those that are online tonight, so don't be discouraged if you didn't get it. Next one. So here's the thing that's really exciting. I know some of you are like, I've never made public comment before. What is that like? How do I do that? One of our partners, the Housing Alliance of Delaware, and we were talking, and they are doing a cultural change agency workshop on February 12th. Oh, I got the other one up. That's fine. And this is the testimony writing workshop. This flyer is in your folder, so you can scan either one if you'd like to go to those. However, I will tell you that if you are ever want to do public comment and you're unsure, but it's something you really want to get into, I would be glad to spend some time with you working on that if it is an issue we support. There are many things that happen, not just in Dover, that people could use support on. There's Newark, the city of Newark. There's even down in Smyrna and Dover and those small cities where laws are passed. And they really need support, especially things that we are supporting ourselves. Sorry, it's late now. All right, I know I gave you guys so much information. Yes, Lynn. No, because I only want them for me. I don't want them for you. See, this is what happens. You guys get on too many lists.
I didn't
What
hear.
you can do is send me an email, Lynn, and I'll send it out. But go ahead. I'm just
I,
kidding.
I
Go,
can-
Lyle, go
10
ahead.
10 seconds. March
No.
2 of this year, Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, will be holding in 42 states, one of which will be Delaware, at noon on March 2. Come to Dover on the west side of Leg Hall on the green. Poor People's Campaign will be there. They'll be in 42 other states at the same time because national leadership, Reverend Dr. Barber and Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris, want to make an impact in this nation regarding the inequities and the injustices that plague us consistently. The goal of the Poor People's Campaign is to end poverty. That's enough. My 10 seconds are up.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can and Lynn, just send me the information in email and I'll get it out. So and that's the other thing I actually didn't mention. It's one of my favorite things to do. And if you have some time off and you like to go to Dover, that's really a lot of fun. You get to meet several legislators. There's a lot of advocacy days that happen. There's a housing advocacy day. There's a criminal justice advocacy day. There are various advocacy groups that do advocacy days that you can show up and just be supportive, wear same colored shirts and whatnot. So I'm really hoping I'm going to open this up to any other questions. I know you guys want to go. We want to see the Eagles win. As I'm looking directly out at my Cowboy colleague fan, but I'm not going to rub it in until after tonight because you guys know how that goes. Yes, Susan.
Thanks for everybody for doing what you're doing. When I read all the things that the Y is supporting, I had a lot of questions about why, as you got into the depth, why the Y was supporting this or that. Is there information available about why? Is there background information available that would let you know, like why the Y is supporting SROs, for example?
SRO training or SROs, period?
SROs being in the schools.
Well, I'm not going to make that statement, but if there was a bill up to get rid of SROs, we would.
No, there isn't that I
Right,
know of.
right. Oh, so what you're asking.
Or like, is there information about what are the particular bills or issues about environmental justice that the Y is working on? Like, so they're more specific.
So yeah, so the specific things that I mentioned here is kind of came from my time with legislators, them telling me what's coming up. Here's what's amazing, and that's what I hope that to do this. I'm going to visit other groups. I hope you guys tell friends. I hope you guys all sign up. When we have enough people, we can bring a bill to them. That's where I want to get. I want to get, if we're going to do a bill without SROs, which already went through and crashed and burned and didn't get anywhere, we need us. We need all of us collectively. SROs are student resource officers. Sorry if I lost you there. And so they're police officers in schools, and we know that children of color are disproportionately affected in that space. More suspensions, more arrests when you have police officers in the school. Yes. Yes. Yeah, you can, I mean, there's not any kind of said research. Yep, I know we're right on 7:30. I'm done. There's a lot of these things that I list specifically are bills that are coming up that I know are coming up. And so I want to make sure that they're on our radar. Again, some things can slide up and be amazing that I didn't know about. Like probation reform is a huge thing this year. You guys could get behind that. It would be amazing. It really needs to push. It's not going to have the votes that it needs if Senator Pinckney doesn't get people. So, well, thank you guys so much for your evening. I really appreciate it. I hope everybody online, and I hope you guys all really sign up for these. I'm going to send you an email asking you to do it again anyway.
Where do you want people to leave their forms that they want to sign up?
At the table back there is good.
Okay.
Yeah, if you filled it out personally, just flip it over and put it on the table so not everybody sees your information. Yes, yeah, I said that to start. Thanks again. was like, I started with that one.